What do we do with our doubts? Everybody has them. In fact, you don't have to be a follower of Jesus to have doubts. Certainly doubts about Jesus. And some of the biggest doubters are people who follow Jesus. Thomas might be our shining example. And there's a lot we can learn and actually relate to when it comes to Thomas and his doubt. What do we do with our doubt? And how do we allow our doubt to drive us to a deeper desire to actually encounter Jesus? Hopefully, we will find out on this episode of Crossroads Online together.
That whenever I'm sad, she gives me a hug, and whenever I need help with my homework, she helps me.
She does stuff with me, she plays games, and she just does a lot.
I get to spend time with her a lot. Like a few weeks ago, I was watching the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and it was 3D, and we had a fun time.
She's really nice and really helpful, and she's really supportive.
Overwhelmingly, she's the best at 10.
She's kind, she's helpful, and she loves play board games with me.
I like coming with you in the morning.
She helps me get organized because me and my brothers are very messy sometimes.
She does everything for me, and she just does everything. I love my mom because I like picking flowers. She loves flowers. I love that she helps us when we get hurt.
The best thing about my mom is she's a good singer.
I like her giving me food, and I like giving hugs.
She's really nice and she's really supportive during school when I'm struggling in things.
She lets me have fun with my friends for birthday parties.
I love my mom because she's super sweet, and whenever I need help, she's there.
The best thing about my mom is she makes some of my favorite meals.
Every day you care about me and you give me food and take care of me and you tuck me in every night.
Hey everybody, my name is Evan.
And my name is Barrick, and you just watched a video with some of our kids celebrating their mothers. And we do want to celebrate mothers that are watching. Happy Mother's Day. And we know that this day can also bring with it potentially a lot of pain for a variety of reasons. So we want you to know that as Crossroads, we're here to celebrate with you and weep with you, especially if this is a challenging day that reminds you of what someone you lost or someone that you don't have. So we want you to know that we would love to pray with you and connect with you if that's something that you need. You can click the Pray With Us button on our website, crossroads140.com. And also, if this is your first time here, we want to welcome you. We're so glad that you chose to join us this week. We would love to connect with you, and you can connect with us through text message, through texting the number on the screen. And also, we know a lot of you watch pretty consistently, and if that's you, we would love for you to share this live stream or this video so that other people can watch alongside you from wherever they are right now. And now we have a couple of things coming up that Evan and I want to let you know about.
Yeah, some pretty exciting things. Okay, so we have our child dedication coming up May 17th. Now this is a time, it's similar to baptism, but baptism is more focused on making a personal decision to follow Jesus and letting everyone know, whereas child dedication is, as the parents, you're choosing to dedicate your child to raise them in a way, raise them in the church, and then the whole church to surround you and raise them in a way that honors Christ, that teaches them about Jesus and the love that he has for them. Absolutely. And so if that is something that interests you, make sure to go to our website. We have signups available there for child dedication. We also have our summer food drive coming up, okay? I mean, it's going on all throughout the month of May, and it's for our community center. We need food so that we can give it out, so that we can hand it out for our food distribution that we have at the community center all summer long. And so this is an opportunity to stock up, to store up for this summer. And so if that interests you, you can go to our Amazon link in the description, or you can show up to one of our campuses, and we have a bag that you can grab with some items that we need on it too.
Absolutely. And now as we move into the next part of our worship service, I'm going to read from John chapter 20. So this is John chapter 20, starting in verse 25. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." This is talking to Thomas. But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." We approach this service today perhaps with doubts, with questions about Jesus, about God, about a lot of things. Well, the God that we love and serve and that loves us is completely okay with our questions. He can handle our doubts. And so with whatever we bring to the service today, let us worship together.
You're the well that never runs.
Well, hello and welcome to Crossroads Online. My name is John O'Contestable. I'm the Eldersburg campus pastor, and I'm just so glad that you're joining us wherever and whenever. That's the beauty of online. You might be on vacation by now, I don't know, but wherever you're tuning in from, we're so glad that you're a part of what God is doing in and through our church. And I do want to say happy Mother's Day. At the time of our recording, it's Mother's Day. And moms are so worthy of honor and celebration. And so I hope you've got plans. But let me also say that I know this day comes with many emotions. And the church has always existed to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And so I don't know where you find yourself on that spectrum today. And there are many reasons to mourn over moms and motherhood. And so we want to meet you in your rejoicing and in your mourning. And we want to celebrate the moms that are present and watching. And so, and if you're watching and you're not a mom, you have a mom. And you should find a way to honor and celebrate her as well today if you can. With that, we are in week 2 of our series, Encounter, where we want to look at these moments that Jesus had after his resurrection. In fact, Jesus, Easter declares the resurrection of Jesus. And so Jesus comes back to life, and then what does he do? He wants to go see all his friends. I love that. And he has these little moments of encounter. Over 40 days, he keeps showing up in the lives of those who followed him, trusted him, his disciples, greater crews and groups of people. And these interactions of the post-resurrection Jesus confirm for us Jesus' resurrection, which is the foundation of our faith. And so they are significant. But more than just that, it means something deeper for us today. It wasn't just true for 40 days then, but if Jesus is alive, it means that he is still encountering people now. And that is a beautiful thing. That Jesus may have a meeting with you, that he actually desires to meet with people. And it's not that we can always explain it, but we can't deny it. It's not that it's always through our 5 senses or some physical way that we encounter Jesus, but we know it's real. And Jesus wants to have encounters with us. And so I thought before we go further, I want to draw a subtle distinction. Some of this is semantics, but a little distinction between experience and encounter. Because I think we may confuse or conflate the two, but I do think they're different. And I want to just explain that, an experience can be really good, can be beautiful, it can be memorable, it can be impactful, but it's not always life-changing. I think of some experiences in my life like trips or concerts I've gone to. Those aren't the only things on the list, but they're great memories. They haven't necessarily changed my life. They haven't necessarily shaped my eternity. But an encounter is a different story. An encounter has a unique way of not just impacting the past, but changing the future, the way we look forward. An encounter is something like when God meets us, it makes a difference. It truly changes us. In fact, my encounter with my now wife changed my life. Or since it's Mother's Day, that first encounter of a mom holding their child, that'll change your life. And so encounters change our lives. And so much of this series is actually kind of peeling back the curtain, if you will, on what we hope for, pray for, and even plan for every week at Crossroads. We want people to encounter God. Our mission statement on the wall at every one of our in-person locations is leading people to life-changing faith in Jesus Christ. Well, I can tell you that experiencing Crossroads is a great thing. It's maybe memorable, it's sentimental, it's good. I've grown up in this church. But an encounter with Jesus is better. An encounter with Jesus is what will leave your life changed forever. That's what we want to cultivate. That's the kind of space we want to create. We want to be the kind of place that is a conduit for encounters. We want to be a people that clear the way as best we can so that you would have an encounter with the God who made you, sees you, knows you, and loves you. That will change your life, not just experiencing our church, as good as I think it is. We believe encounters still happen because Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive, and that means he may have a meeting with you. You might have a meeting with the risen King Jesus. So we want to look at encounters people had with Jesus after he came back to life so that we might grow in our desire to encounter him. I say grow in our desire because that's a controllable factor when there's a lot we can't control when it comes to encountering God. Much of it's on His terms, and that's okay. But we can cultivate a desire to encounter God. That's a lot of what our message today is going to be about. That how do we grow in our encounter? Today we're going to look at one resurrection encounter that this guy has a reputation that precedes himself. Maybe you didn't even grow up in church, and I'm going to tell you who it is, and maybe you've heard the title. Maybe you've heard the name. Maybe you are familiar with the story just from hearing it by his title. Now, I'm here to say I don't think his title is very honoring or accurate or good, especially considering I think it's a title every one of us, myself especially included, could have. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Thomas today. And if you think of Thomas, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is doubting Thomas. Sure. As if none of us have any doubts. As if none of us have anything to wonder about, to question, and to worry about. And so we'll talk about why I don't think his name is very fair, because I think his faith is more admirable than we give him credit for. And so I want to look at this story captured by the Apostle John in his gospel account. In John chapter 20, starting in verse 24, this is after the resurrection, we read this. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus showed up the first time. He had an encounter with the other guys. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed." John goes on to speak about the purpose of his account of the gospel, his account of Jesus' life. He says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is God's word. And I think it has much to reveal in terms of an encounter with God. So if we want to learn about what an encounter with Jesus is like and what an encounter with Jesus does, I want us to look at the doubt of Thomas, the surprise of Jesus, and the only right response in light of it. And the first one is disproportionate to the other two. So it's a little longer. The other two are a little shorter. But let's begin with the doubt of Thomas. If this is what he's known for, we should talk about it. It seems to be a significant portion of this part of text, that he adamantly doubted that Jesus came back to life. And he had honest doubts. Like if we can be honest, he had honest doubts. He missed the first encounter, which was oddly, eerily similar. I mean, they were in a locked room. Jesus showed up, said, "Peace be with you," twice. And then here it happens a week later. So it's almost a copy-paste experience. But Thomas wasn't there. He didn't have the encounter. He didn't have the moment. He didn't see it. He only had to hear about it. And so he makes this bold claim. And he says, well, in light of them saying, "We've seen the Lord," he says, well, unless I see and unless I touch the wounds myself, I will not believe. He immediately attached conditions to his belief. He said, my belief is contingent. It's conditional. It will require proof and evidence. And can we just be really honest? Because this is where I don't think his title is fair when we feel the same. Wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't faith be easier if Jesus just showed up, if we could just see, if we could just hear, if he just spoke, if we just knew, if he gave us the evidence we asked for, if he showed up in the way we wanted him to, if he showed up when we expected him to and wanted him to? Wouldn't that make things easier? I know I have felt this way, and so I know I'm speaking to people who have felt this way. And it does seem reasonable to say it would be easier. And we have to give Thomas some credit here because doubt comes naturally to all of us. It really does. I don't think I've met anybody who just doesn't struggle with doubt in any way. Some people maybe are more doubtful and maybe others are less, but I think it's a human condition. I think it seems to be something we all wrestle with. And here's my guess why. I think it boils down to this singular truth. We doubt because we don't know everything and we don't control much of anything. And in light of not knowing and not controlling, expect some doubting. And I'll go deeper yet. Doubt and trust seem to almost always go hand in hand. So I don't think it should be crazy when we express trust in God and still have doubts and questions. Because you do that with your spouse, although you don't want to admit it. You find it hard to put full confidence in your friends, in your boss, in your employment, in your 401k. You trust the government and you doubt the government. We do this with everything. And so do we really have space to hold both? In fact, it's a uniquely human thing to hold two seemingly contradictory things in tension and say, I know and I doubt. I have faith and I have questions. I have confidence and I'm not so sure. That's actually a beautiful mystery that we can hold both things in tension. And we've got plenty of reasons to doubt. I made a list: broken trust, past experiences, pain and hurt, disappointment and letdowns, fear and danger. There are plenty of reasons to not trust and to insert suspicion and doubt instead. And specific to our story, maybe chief on the list is that when someone dies, they stay dead. And Thomas is simply saying, I saw him die. I've been to the cross. Well, he wasn't actually at the cross, but he's like, I've seen people hang on the cross before. It's not something you come back from. And I know what you're saying, but you are crazy. And I know he was powerful, but I saw him die and my hope died with him. And you can't talk me out of this. You can't convince me otherwise. It's an honest doubt. It is an honest struggle. Can we really fault Thomas for the depths of his doubt? Can we really blame him when we find ourselves in the same position so often? And is it so wrong that he wants to have an encounter with Jesus himself? Because that's what he's saying. Until I get to touch the marks, until I see him, until I experience it. There's strong conditions, and Jesus will have something to say to him, certainly. But it's not wrong that he wants to have an encounter with God. In fact, it's a good thing. Don't we want the same? Weren't we actually created to encounter God? Isn't that what heaven will be like? Eternity will be like forever? And so it's not wrong to want to have an encounter. But Jesus has an encounter planned. It's just later than he wanted. Like, did you catch it? It says, and 8 days later, Jesus shows up. Why didn't he show up one day later? Why didn't he show up just the second time when he knew Thomas was going to be there? I don't have any good answers. It's all conjecture. It probably wouldn't be wise to assume too much. It's fun to think of some reasons why that might be the case. Maybe there's just a lesson for you and I as to why he waited. And I don't get to know. I don't know why Thomas wasn't at the first meeting. He could have been sick. I don't know what it was. But for a whole week, Thomas had to hear. In fact, the Greek implies that his friends told him and kept telling him that there was a persistent pestering, if you will. You had to be there. Dude, we really saw him. You wouldn't believe it. You can imagine they told him what it was like from every angle of the room. Because it wasn't just the 10. There was probably some other people in this room. And so they probably had every angle, this is what his wounds were like. This is what he said. This is what it felt like. It was undeniable. We can't explain it, but we can't deny it. And they were probably emphatic. Thomas, come on, you know us. Why won't you believe us? He had good reasons to believe, but he persisted in his doubt. He dug his heels in, and I'll tell you, a stubborn heart is something that's hard to work around. He refused to believe and instead made very high demands. And here's what happens to doubt over time. Doubt over time can become belief. Suddenly, we go from a curiosity or a question to something we dig our heels in enough that we become cold and callous, cut off to. We close our grip, and it becomes a belief, not just a doubt. It's not so open-ended. It's a closed case. And this is what begins to happen in Thomas. Doubt over time becomes belief. And here's what's so beautiful, though. Don't miss this. Despite his disbelief, this community didn't give up on him, and he didn't give up on them. Despite his disbelief and doubt, he showed up. See, doubting does not mean you have to leave the room. In fact, if he left the room and never came back, he might have missed the encounter again. In fact, the best way to have an encounter is to go to the places where you might encounter him and to not give up on doubt. And this is where churches have a lot of growing and learning to do, ourselves included, to make space for people who are not yet sure about where they stand with Jesus. They are not yet sure. They have reasonable doubts. They have honest doubts that I can't fault them for having. They've got good questions and they hold these things, but doubts are welcome. As long as they don't become belief, doubts are a beautiful thing. Doubts create curiosity. Curiosity keeps us looking for Jesus. And Jesus says, when you search for me, you'll find me. When you search for me with your whole heart, you will find me. And so doubts can be the very thing that lead to an encounter. They can lead us to an encounter. He had his doubts, but he still showed up in the room, and this crew still showed up for him. And we need to learn how to walk alongside people in their doubts. Now, it's not to say Jesus didn't have a little course correction for Thomas in his doubt. He actually had a very strong and directed command to Thomas. Notice he says, peace be with you, and then he says, Thomas. I mean, he zooms in, turning to Thomas. Look at, you can imagine, right? And I don't know how Thomas is feeling at this point, but I think he's pretty sure at this point, I don't know that there's much more room for doubt in this moment. And he turns to him and he says, come touch and see. But he ends by saying, stop doubting and believe. Now, it might sound harsh, but it's actually really loving and good that Jesus said this. It's for good reason. It's for his best that Jesus actually said this, because he didn't want his doubt to become belief, especially around something so crucial and critical, so fundamental and foundational as what his doubt was based on. See, he believed a lot of things about Jesus that were accurate. He believed that Jesus existed. He believed Jesus was good. He probably believed Jesus was wrongly killed and accused. He probably believed in Jesus' teachings. He believed in Jesus' power and wisdom. He saw the miracles himself. There were probably a lot of true things he believed about Jesus, but he drew the line at the resurrection. See, he wasn't doubting whether or not Jesus mattered. He was doubting whether or not Jesus was alive. And that distinction is critical. And this is why Jesus presses the matter and so strongly and directly confronts his doubt, because it had to do with the very foundation of our faith, the resurrection of Jesus. This is the fundamental, foundational, historic, life-changing, and life-saving truth that our faith is built on. This is the grounds, even if they start out as a square foot of space in your heart, even if they start small like a seed. This is where the Holy Spirit moves in. The kingdom of God grows and expands. This is where God begins to build a new life in you. And it has to do on this truth. Because to believe the resurrection of Jesus is to believe that everything else Jesus said is true, that he is who he said he was, and that we should be careful to consider everything he said. That we shouldn't now suddenly say, you know what? I don't know as much as I thought I knew. The very reason for doubt is actually a good reason for faith too. I don't know that much, so I'm going to doubt. I don't know that much, so I'm going to have faith. Jesus flips everything upside down in his resurrection, and it is precisely for this reason that Jesus zooms in and presses the matter. It's not just one more element. It's not just a component of our faith, one belief among many others. It is at the core. If this is not true, everything we believe collapses and crumbles. It fails and falls like everything else. This is so foundational. And so his doubt matters because it falls squarely on that place that everything else is determined. It falls in that inflection point, the crescendo, the main moment of ultimate decision. It's the real question underneath every other question. In fact, when the human soul starts to contemplate and consider and believe in Jesus' existence, his resurrection, and its implications for our life, it's precisely then that all of heaven leans in. This is the moment that Jesus looks for in our lives. And it mattered that he would talk about this. See, you can believe that Jesus existed. You can believe he was good, that he did powerful, beautiful things. You can believe he was a good teacher, that he should be listened to, that he had a lot of good life advice. But if Jesus isn't risen, then he's not Lord. Then he's not King. Then he's not God over life and death, and even and especially your life and death, my life and death. It is mission critical. And if there's no risen Jesus, there's no resurrection hope for us. It's why Paul says we are most to be pitied if we're wrong, but we have the most to gain if we're right. If he is risen, it changes everything. The resurrection is the epicenter. It's the only solid ground. Everything else is sinking sand. This is the new reality we're invited into. And so I want to say Thomas's doubt is understandable. It's natural even. It's understandable, but it is by no means insignificant. It is cosmic, it's eternal, and its implications are huge. It is the singular moment of transformation. It is the singular piece that we build all the other beliefs on in our faith. And it's why what happens next is so surprising. And so I told you that's the big one. And now we want to look at the surprise of Jesus. The surprise is simply this. He showed up. He knew. I mean, the way he calls out Thomas, he seemed to know what Thomas was thinking and feeling and what Thomas said a week ago. And he still showed up. Didn't have to. Thomas didn't show up to the cross. Thomas didn't believe him. Thomas closed the door. He did not have to, but Jesus showed up. He initiated. He surprised them. And look, every time there's an encounter with God, it is a grace from God. Every time we have a moment of undeniable, unexplainable encounter with God, it is his grace. It's always on his terms. And so I want to look at the grace that is unearned, undeserved, unforeseen. Usually it's surprising. How does it play out here? Well, I wrote down 3. The first is, he says, peace be with you. It's the first thing he says. Can you imagine? In the room, the doors were locked. So it's one thing that he just materialized into thin air. Like maybe that's just what you should say if you do that, because it's terrifying and shocking. So you just say, hey, whoa, peace, everybody. It's okay. But it's more than that. They were terrified. The reason the doors were locked is because they knew that if they got Jesus, they're out for the rest. They were living in fear. They were anxious. And then somebody shows up in the middle of the room, uninvited. This is compounded terror. There is shock and fear at play in them. And then in one word, Jesus. I mean, remember, all he had to say to the storm and the sea was peace, and it listened. Can you imagine what it does to a soul in shock? Can you imagine what it does when Jesus speaks peace? One way you know you've had an encounter with God is despite the terror, the shock, the awe, there is also a peace beyond understanding. There is something that feels like I was meant to live in this place. I was meant to live in the presence of this God. I was meant to be with this Jesus. That's one expression of the grace. The second is that he meets Thomas in his doubt. He meets Thomas right where he is. And instead of denying him, condemning him, excluding him, pushing him out because of his doubt, he does just the opposite. Remember, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he was gracious before he died, what makes us think he's not going to be gracious after he died? He says to Thomas, draw near to me. Come near, feel, touch, see. I want you to know beyond shadow of a doubt that I died for you and that I have all power and authority and came back to life. And here I am. And I don't want you to miss this critical truth. And he invites him close, but it is implied that Thomas didn't have to touch. Because Jesus goes on to say, all it took was seeing for you to believe. Blessed are those who do not see and will believe. We'll talk about that in a second. But apparently he didn't have to touch him to know. All his doubts went out the window, and there's plenty of fun reasons why this might be the case. Maybe it's just the fact he materialized in the room out of nothing. That would probably do it for me. But I like to think that it was when Jesus said peace. I like to think it was when he spoke, because remember, just a few chapters earlier, Jesus talked about being the good shepherd, and he said his sheep will know the sound of his voice. They'll know by just hearing his word. And so often how we encounter God now is by hearing a word through a friend, through scripture, in a quiet moment. It's that whisper, but it's that encounter. And so I like to believe the second he said peace, every person in that room knew. And there was not just shock and fear now, but there was, oh, Jesus. That's Jesus. That's my Jesus. He's back. But he doesn't stop there. His third grace is giving him hard truth. His third grace is stop doubting and believe. It's a rebuke. It's a hard truth. It's kind of putting him in his place, especially in front of everybody. He's like, you believed only because you saw? Hey, there are going to be people who don't see me and they believe. It's almost like he's like, Thomas, man, come on. And I think he's really pressing the point that more people are going to believe and not see me. And so I want you to be wise and listen to the words of the witnesses who saw me. You know, that's what we have. We have eyewitness accounts recorded in the 4 Gospels. We have people who have still been encountering Jesus. And when they share their story of encounter that's unexplainable but undeniable, we would be wise to listen, especially when that person loves us. When they have our best interest. These were his friends. And he refused to listen and believe. So he had some course correcting to give Thomas. He said, yeah, it is actually a grace that he would say this. He says, I don't want you to get off base here. And the truth is this, pain and healing both begin with truth. So pain, truth can bring pain, but it can bring pain for sake of healing. It's the scalpel analogy. It's the surgery. You know, recovery from surgery is no fun, but it's for sake of healing. It's because something better is available. And Jesus does this when he shares truth. It is always a grace that he shares hard truth. And when somebody died and came back to life, you simply go, yes, sir. I believe you. And if that's the word you have for me, that's the word I'll receive. And so Jesus is graciously correcting him. And to see, every true encounter with God is grace. Jesus goes on to say, blessed are us, you and me. For the heavy majority of people watching, listening, and in the room, it's true that we probably have not seen Jesus. I know there are exceptions and visions and dreams, but in the flesh, in person, I don't know anybody. I haven't heard too many stories. It's not the majority. It's small, it's few. But fortunately for us, our encounters are not limited to our 5 senses. And I love to press the point by simply saying there are already things that we can't quantify but can't deny that we believe in. What is love? We know it's real, we know it's something, but what is it? You can't hold it, you can't explain it all the time. What is beauty? What is goodness? What is truth? There are so many things we know exist, but we can't experience them always in our 5 senses. So we would be wise to remember that encounters with God don't always look like our 5 senses, but they're all the same real. Real when God's word jumps off the page of the Bible, right into our heart, speaks right to that situation, right into that moment. When, as so often is the case, God comes as a whisper in a quiet moment, when we make space for him, when we're on a walk in nature and creation, when a friend speaks to us. When we're in church, we can encounter God. And we can encounter God in our shame, our guilt, our fear, our doubt, and yes, even our disbelief. These are all places in which we might encounter God, but let me assure you of this. Any encounter with God is by his grace. It's by his grace that we would receive it. Undeserved, unearned, and unforeseen. It's always surprising. And we can't count for it. We can't account for it. We go through life and we're great at predicting bad things. We're great at fearing bad things. We're not so good at imagining the unforeseen ways that God might surprise us this day. So it's not wrong that we grow our desire to experience. And so Thomas here, Jesus meets Thomas where he is. He brings peace. He offers grace. He tells him truth. And Thomas must respond. And so we look at the only right response. And it's so good. In fact, it's so good, I would love to make a humble submission. Who am I to do this? But that we don't call Thomas Doubting Thomas. We call him the great convert, because what he says next is maybe one of the most accurate and profound declarations and claims of Christ that any disciple had actually made up until this point. It is wild what he says. My Lord and my God. Now, that might not sound radical, but in a Jewish context, he grew up believing in a one true God who was creator, source, and sustainer of all life and order. That there was a God who was powerful, more powerful than anything else you could possibly imagine. That there was a God worthy of submission and trust. That there was a Lord, a king, a priest, a high ruler that will come one day, the Messiah, the chosen one. And he is now realizing fully, for the first time in this moment, who has been walking with him, who has been patient with him, who has been loving him, who has been with him, who has dealt with his doubt, who has met him in his shame. He's finally realizing, this is my God. This is Yahweh in flesh. This is the chosen one here before me. Can you imagine the moment? This is worship. To rightly see God and declare his worthiness. This is what worship is. And we do it much through song, but it happens in many other forms. It's the moment Thomas finally really gets it. He moves in this moment from conditions for belief to unconditional surrender. And that is something that happens when you encounter Jesus. You'll know you encountered Jesus when you have all your conditions and reasons for doubt. And suddenly in one moment, they're gone. And you have unconditional surrender. That the only right response is surrender, trust, and worship. Thomas didn't have all his questions answered. That was not the foundation of his faith in this moment. But he moved from unless I to my God, my Savior, my Lord, Jesus. That moment of transition. See, because one encounter with Jesus is all it takes to change everything. And the truth is, if Jesus really is real and really is resurrected and you have an encounter with him, every other question becomes secondary, doesn't it? Every other question seems to just kind of fall away. You're like, well, I'll figure that out when I need to. Or it doesn't matter that much. If Jesus is really real and he's back from the dead, it changes the nature of the questions that we are asking, doesn't it? In fact, it forces us to apply and adopt a new filter for the way in which we see our lives and everything around us. Well, then, if Jesus really is who he said he was, what does that mean for my relationships, my priorities, my purpose, my existence, my future, eternity? What does that mean for my hope? What does that mean for my neighbor? What does that mean for my family? We cannot help but ask new questions in light of a risen, resurrected Jesus. And all it takes is one encounter to get there. In fact, to rightly see Jesus and declare and claim that he is who he said he was is apparently John's entire purpose for writing. I mean, he gets super meta at the end and he writes about his writing. And he says, this is why I wrote it all down. I love that he started by saying he did a lot of other crazy, wild, cool stuff. He's like, we didn't even have time to write it. That is awesome. But it implies something, doesn't it? That what Jesus can do for you is not the main purpose of his writing. Who Jesus is to you is his primary focus. And he does not want you to miss the eyewitness account of who Jesus is. Thomas almost missed what the witnesses said and saw. And John said, I will preserve and protect this at all costs so that you can make the same claim on the grounds of a witness who saw a man die and come back to life. And John, mind you, was the one and only disciple who was at the cross. He saw him die. He saw his last breath. Maybe he heard the words he spoke. And here he confidently declares, I saw him alive again. And upon this confession, this is where faith is born. This is where encounters begin. This is where it all changes. Everything changes when we begin to confess and believe this. The resurrection is truth with proof that Jesus is God. The only question now is, will you claim it? Is he your God? It's one thing to be the God, and he is whether or not you agree or not. The question is, will you claim him as your king? Will you claim him as the risen king? Will you claim Jesus as your Lord and your God? This is ultimately the challenge. And in light of this, what do we do? This is where we'll get a little practical, but what do we do with our doubt? I thought long and hard about what do we do with doubt, because I still have doubt too. So I thought this is not something I can gloss over easily. What do we do with our very real questions? We surrender them. And that might sound like a churchy answer or even too simple of an answer, but let me just give you a posture that I think does a better job than preaching. This is the posture of surrender. It's open-handed. It says, I have doubts in one hand, but I have faith in another, and I hold them in tension. It says, I have doubts, but I haven't yet let them become a belief that stands opposed or opposite to Jesus. It says, I have doubts, but instead of letting them drive a wedge between me and Jesus, I actually allowed them to become a bridge for me between me and Jesus. It says, I'm going to allow my doubts, which is really just a way of saying, I don't know it all, and I'm okay with not knowing it all, which is a great way to live in this life. It is to say, I'm going to let my doubts drive me to a deeper desire to truly encounter Jesus. I'm going to allow the doubts that show up in my life to actually not drive me away from Jesus, but to say, Lord, all the more reason to desire an encounter with you. If you're really real, and if you're really resurrected, and if you're still really encountering people, would you encounter me? Would you have a meeting with me today? Now look, we can't fabricate an encounter with God. We can't control it or coerce it. We can't do any of these things when it comes to an encounter. It's always grace from God. But what we can do is make ourselves available. What we can do is open our hands in worship, in trust, and in surrender and say, God, meet me. What we can do is grow deeper in our desire to truly encounter Jesus. Man, that would serve us all well. If that's what heaven is, let's start today and let's learn from Thomas to share honest doubts in community, to not give up on community, to be okay belonging even if we don't believe yet, to make space if we already are bought in and believe and we're witnesses, to share what we've seen and saw, and to make space for those who still have doubts and aren't where we are yet. Let's make sure that we listen to witnesses, especially when they have our best interest in mind. Let's pray and stay humble. Let's say, I don't know it all, and that's okay. And let's stop demanding conditions before surrender. And so the sermon's not the main point today. Really, it's the worship. And this is good news for anyone online, because you can worship anywhere you are. And Jesus, every encounter is a surprise. And so he might surprise you on the road, in your breakfast, in a screaming van full of kids, like I don't know where, but it's always a surprise. And he may have an encounter for you. And so it's a posture of open-handedness. And one way we express this is in our giving. And so as we move into a time of offering, I invite you to open your hands with all that we have. Sometimes it takes practicing in other ways, which is why we have spiritual disciplines. It's practicing prayer, practicing worship, practicing community, practicing generosity. And when we practice these things, when we show up in the room with the community, we get surprised when Jesus shows up too. That's my hope. That's my prayer. That's peeling back the curtain on what we try to do every Sunday here at Crossroads, wherever and whenever you're watching. And so let's clear the runway so that we might have an encounter with God. Pray with me. Jesus, Lord, oh God, I want us to encounter you, that we might say alongside Thomas, my Lord and my God. Jesus, I love the simple prayer, and it seems sufficient for today. God, I believe, help my unbelief. I believe, God, help my unbelief. Would you meet us? Would you encounter us? Jesus, we trust you, we love you, and it's in your name we pray and ask all these things.